And I could not remember, guys, how I had done it the week before. I couldn't remember if I was supposed to do Song of Songs on Monday night or Tuesday night. And so since the Torah portion came so fast and so fresh, I just decided to just let it flow into the rest of the evening. And so if it's backward, I apologize. Typically those things work out for good though. So Cheryl, I think the answer to that would be yes, probably. When you do a word search and you find similar words, that's typically an indicator that that's a word in the hood. And even if it's not an exact match, it may lend understanding. So sure, yeah. Okay, now I'm going to share the screen. Oh, and if you'll notice before I pull the screen up, because I'm going to have the same thing on the screen in the chat box. And for those watching the recording, they won't be able to see what's in the chat box, but I do have it on the PowerPoint. You'll just have to, I guess, type it in letter for letter if you want to read it. But if you go to it today, it's in today's online Times of Israel newspaper. And if you just scan down through today's articles, this is the first, I do that. This is the first article I pulled up because I'm interested in the archaeology. Israel Finkelstein, who's like the major guy in Israel, archaeologist, he just visited Tamar Park and I saw pictures of it in their newsletter. And so anyway, I found this article this morning and it so fit in. I wished I had had it last weekend when I was teaching on the name like purified oil, because I think this explains a lot. And the article, well, let me go ahead and share it with you. But anyway, there's the link. If you can see the chat right now, then you're able to click on the link and maybe pull up to read later, because it's worth reading the entire article. And you just have to toss out the stuff that says, you know, they don't really think the Gospels are true because we have the testimony. We're not turning loose of that. But anyway, let me share the screen. And okay, yeah, we are on lesson 12. All right, so this was the article that I pulled up this morning. And I saw this headline that said ancient ritual bath may mark the first New Testament era find at Yeshua's Gethsemane, which would be Gat Shemen, by the way. And Gat Shemen means the oil press. A gat is a press for wine or oil, where you would press the fruits in order to obtain oil or the juice out of it. And so I cut and paste, so it looks a little cockeyed. But this, they say, is the first time that they have found something that connects Yeshua, the Garden of Gethsemane, and the Second Temple. But, you know, so much stuff has been built on top of there in the last 2,000 years. I think it's pretty remarkable they found anything from that era. We know this is where Yeshua waited for his arrest after the Passover Seder. And that's going to help us look at some things in this section of Song of Songs. Certain words, when we see them, make us think of certain festivals. And if we see Tzarar, or tribulation, we think of Passover, because they were brought out of Tzarar. They were brought out of tribulation. They were brought out of Egypt, which is Mitzrayim. And you can hear the Tsar in Mitzrayim. And if you translate it out, it means from the tribulations. Or the means by which tribulations are accomplished. So associating the Passover with this olive press, we can see this is exactly what happened to Yeshua. He was being pressed in this olive grove, and he even prayed. He's like, let this cup pass from me. And of course, it couldn't. It just wasn't the Father's will. And so he's pressed so hard in the olive grove that it said he sweat great drops of blood. And so that tells us that it's very consistent with what we know of how we produce the oil for the light of the menorah. We have to be crushed, we have to be pressed. And so Yeshua's soul is pressed so hard. I mean, he's grieving. It's the most intense grief. And the grief is so intense that literally drops of blood came out of his flesh. And so if you think of where he was situated in an olive grove where there's an olive press, then it's very believable. It's in the right setting. Plus, with the discovery of this mikveh, here's a picture of the excavation they're doing. And it's on the Mount of Olives, so you can look there across the Kidron Valley. And in the Kidron Valley, you do see olive trees in rows down below it. And then if you look up a little higher, there's a Muslim cemetery. And there's going to be what's called the Lion's Gate or the Golden Gate into the city. And then, of course, you can see the dome up there, the gold dome, which is over the area of the temple itself. The holier spaces of the temple, whether that would have literally been over the Ark of the Covenant or not, we don't know exactly, but it gives you a general position. And so finding this mikveh or this ritual bath located on the Mount of Olives is significant because in Jewish law at that time, if you were going to press out olive oil or if you were going to press out wine, in order for those products to be kosher and pure themselves, fit for ritual use, then the worker had to immerse himself in a mikveh. He had to be pure before he worked on obtaining the pure product from the press. And so if there was a mikveh up there where Yeshua was praying while he waited for the officials to come and arrest him and waited for Judas to identify him, then it makes me wonder if not at that time, perhaps at that time, but I'm wondering if he and maybe even his disciples did not go to this mikveh and immerse just prior to their meal in preparation for the Passover, because that was very typical even for men to immerse before a feast or festival, especially before Yom Kippur, but yes, for other feasts too, like Passover, or Shavuot, or Sukkot. And so the situation of it makes me wonder if part of Yeshua's lingering in that area wasn't because he had access to a mikveh that would have been away from the crowded mikvahot there on the temple area itself. And so it's just like even the geography has conspired to teach us lessons here, that the name like purified oil, it's the name of Mashiach, the anointed one. And even prior to the Mashiach being pressed out, it's possible that he purified himself like a worker in a vineyard or a worker in an olive press, that knowing that this oil was about to be pressed out of him unto death, that he went ahead and ritually immersed beforehand. So I just thought that was an interesting article that popped up that might interest you, especially in the context of the lessons we've just come out of with the name like purified oil, and looking at the progression, of the different things like water, wine, oil, milk, and so forth that represent our different stages of growth, and how the water would have preceded the oil. And so if Yeshua preceded his pressing at Gat Shemen with an immersion, with a ritual immersion, then it just lends credence to the pattern of the word, that there is a progression of things and all these things are related in some way. So let's go on to our next verse, which is Song of Songs 1:5. And it says, I am black, but lovely. Some editions will say comely. I don't know that in English in the United States nowadays we use the word comely very much. So it says, I am black but lovely, O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon. So hopefully we can work through what it means to be black and lovely. Who the daughters of Jerusalem are. And this would be glossary words, by the way, big time glossary words. If you're keeping track of your biblical symbols, then you'll want to know who daughters are or what they can signify in scripture. And we'll probably hopefully make it through the tents of Kedar. And then we'll save the curtains of Solomon for next week, because I don't think we got time to get through all of it. So let's go back to I am black but lovely, or you could read it because it's a vav. You can read it I am black and lovely. And so again, maybe the answer there is yes. So we're looking for shachor. You might see it as shachora if it's feminine adjective, and then the verb itself is shachar. That's going to be the meat of what I want to get into here. I really want to dissect what it means to be black, because in its contexts, we have both good and questionable things. But the good news is that the black hair, the se'ar, shachor, the black hair, its context in the Torah, it's in the book of Leviticus, it's in the book of purities. And it's not a sign of leprosy, it's a sign that leprosy has been healed. And so if we go to Leviticus 13:31, I won't read the whole passage, we'll just skip from verse 31 to 37. It says, if the priest looks at the infection of the scale, and indeed it appears to be no deeper than the skin, and there is no black hair in it. Okay, so part of the criteria for looking for an infection of tsarat is if the priest can't find a black hair in it. A black hair is going to be a disqualifier for tsarat. In other words, if the priest can look at the wound, the infection, and he can see right off that it's just skin surface level. It's just a normal wound that it doesn't have any spiritual significance to it at all. You just banged it on something. Or you've had an allergic reaction to something. It has a strictly natural explanation for being there. But there's a second qualifier. He says, if there's no black hair in it, okay, that's a concern, because if the priest sees black hair, you're good. It's just like saying, oh, this is just skin, skin deep. It's nothing under the skin here. It's just an external wound. Well, if there's black hair in it, the black hair is the sign that it is not contagious, that it is not caused supernaturally by the things that provoke a supernatural affliction of leprosy or tsarat. Because remember, leprosy is not a natural disease. It's a supernatural disease. It's supernaturally imposed. What we know as Hansen's disease today is not biblical leprosy. And we don't even see, at least to the visible eye anymore, tsarat. We might be seeing some effects of it, but in terms of literally seeing the wound, we don't see it. It's like that shut down when the temple shut down, because you don't have people who are qualified to make that diagnosis, either of infection or of healing. And you don't have a place to go to. You don't have a temple for these rituals to take place. So a black hair is a good sign. It says, if you can't find the black hair, then that it's a suspicious wound. It says, then the priest shall isolate the person with the scaly infection for 7 days. So you have a quarantine period, which sounds very familiar to us today. And then it goes on, after he's been in quarantine for 7 days, it says, if in his sight the scale has remained, however, and black hair has grown in it, the scale has healed, he is clean, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. So what we see in both of these bookend pieces of instruction about a mark of leprosy is that a black hair will disqualify it as this particular disease of tsarat. So what we're looking for is se'ar shachor. Se'ar is hair. Shachor is black or blackish. If we see shachora, it means more like blackish or dusky colored. And I do want to break down the meanings of shachar and shachor because they have prophetic implications as well. But I wanted you to see the earlier mentions of the black hair, the se'ar shachor, because it's directly tied to the black horse of Revelation. And when we see the black horse riding out, there's significant things attached to him that should sound familiar once we get the significance of shachor. So the black hair in an examination of a wound in your head or your beard. And remember, it was there that you might find that yellowish green hair that corresponds to the color of the pale horse. Or in Zechariah, he's called the dappled horse. And if you don't know what a dapple gray horse is, now dapples can come in other colors. And I've seen a horse that almost meets the criteria, the literal criteria of chloros, which is yellowish green, or yoroch in Hebrew, which is the yellowish green. It would be a pale, pale, pale green to the point of being yellowish. But there is a dilution of a sorrel horse, which is kind of a reddish horse. And if that gene is, bringing in a diluted coat, you might see this really pale yellow coat, and yet you can still see dapples embedded within it. But for the normal dapple gray horse, the one that we're used to seeing, it's going to have that specific kind of a grayish coat pattern and then white dapples that we learned from Barod, which describes the dappling, is supposed to look like hail damage. Basically, dapple gray horses have the hail damage. But those are, remember, associated with the pale horse of Revelation. A gray horse is going to be a dilution of the black. But if we can see this good, healthy black hair in the head or in the beard, then that signifies that there is a return to ritual purity. In other words, this person is now clear to come into the holy spaces of the temple. He can come into the area of sacrifice. He can come in there at the festivals. He can come into any place that's permitted to him as an individual, whether he's an Israelite, whether he's a Levite, whether he's a Cohen, whether he's a Cohen Hagadol. The sign of the black hair is a sign that there's life. And so I wanted just to show you some of the alternative, they're not really alternatives, some commentary from the Midrash that augments what the rabbis are seeing in the beloved statement that she is black or blackish, dusky, and lovely, beautiful. And so one commentary, it says what she's saying is, I am swarthy. Yes, she's dark, but they're using it relative to the lost 10 tribes who are in exile without the Torah. So it says, I am swarthy among the 10 tribes, but I am comely with the tribe of Judah and Benjamin, which, this statement makes perfect sense in light of last night's lesson. So they're saying, I am swarthy in this world, but I am comely in the world to come. In other words, the 10 tribes will be reconciled with Judah and Benjamin in the world to come. And her darkness out in the exile, that will be healed. And then together they will become beautiful in the world to come. Other alternative explanations. She says, I'm swarthy all the days of the week, because she's working, because the next verse will kind of explain that, like, I've been out in the sun and this is why I'm dark. She's been working. They're like the work days. But she says, I am comely on Shabbat. In other words, I clean up good for Shabbat. I don't continue working on Shabbat. That would be a definite sunburn if I were to continue to work on Shabbat. Might be the mark of Sunday or something. I don't know. Another one says, I am swarthy all the days of the year, but I am comely on the Day of Atonement. And so those are just kind of thrown in there as things to think about. But where I want to go back to unpacking what is shachor, or what is shachorah. Shachorah would be that blackish. Shachor is black. Strangely though, shachor also means light. So it's a contronym. At the same time it's black, it's light. And you've studied this word before when you did Creation Gospel Workbook 1. In Isaiah 14:12, it says, how you have fallen from heaven, O star of the morning, son of the dawn. And dawn there is shachor. You have been cut down to the earth, you who have weakened the nations. This king of Babylon just keeps coming up here lately. There's something we're supposed to be learning about it. So we get shachor or shachorah, which means swarthy or black. And we also get the dawn, which is the first light of the day. They're all derived from shachar, which is Strong 7836. Now, in the passage where it's presented in Workbook 1, Isaiah 14:12, it's used more in a mocking, taunting manner. Remember, this address is to the king of Babylon, who raised up his golden self-image. He calls in the nations to worship it. And then because the 3 Hebrews won't worship it, he throws them into the fiery furnace. And by seeing himself as star of the morning, son of the dawn, that has a specific significance. Shachor is going to signify somebody specific. And what we see is that the king of Babylon, he desired to be sought, right? That's what, what do we have in the modern time that might help us understand what King Nebuchadnezzar was after? Well, if somebody wants to be a famous movie star, then that is somebody who desires to be sought. Somebody who wants people seeking after them. Now, of course, once they get to be a movie star, they find out it's not all it's cracked up to be, because, the crazy people seek after you as well, not just the fun people. And so fame and fortune they do have a stark reality that people typically don't get until it's too late, because it's too late to be unfamous. Because at that point, you would have to do things to make yourself infamous, but you're never really going to be unfamous. So King Nebuchadnezzar wanted to be sought by the nations. In fact, he even wanted to be sought by the righteous. And so at the dedication of his golden image, we see that not only does he invite in the nations, he makes sure that the three Hebrews, who we know were noblemen, they were nobles of Judah, and they had been traded out. This is before King Nebuchadnezzar had destroyed Jerusalem. There were periods where he would threaten to come destroy Jerusalem or do a preliminary siege, and he would be bought off by a king of Judah. Sometimes he would send them, like we talked about, the gold of the temple. He would send them the gold of the temple. And it's said that this is what Nebuchadnezzar founded his golden self-image on, because without some special quality to the gold, his golden image would not be able to support itself. The engineering of it, just gold is too soft a metal for something of that size. But it said that he used the gold of the temple, which had some supernatural quality to it, that even though gold is a soft metal, it was able to support all the weight of the structure, such as the golden menorah. And so by underpinning his self-image with the gold of the temple, that this was how the image was able to stay upright. And so having these noblemen of Judah to come in and wanting them to also bow down to his golden image, that was part of his plan B. He's trying to seduce them away from the true morning star. The true morning star is going to be Mashiach. But in Isaiah, it's the king of Babylon who we can see as being taunted because he tried to pass himself off as star of the morning, son of the dawn, the Shachor, the first light. And again, with the son of the dawn, we get this idea of the first light of creation, the one who separates the light from the darkness. And we know Yeshua is the word of creation. We know he is the lamb slain from the foundation of the world. He is the one who separated light and darkness on the first day. And so for Nebuchadnezzar, it was important to have these Hebrews there to bow to his image. He thought if they would bow to this image of the beast, and anytime we worship ourselves like that, it is bowing to the image of the beast. And Uzi, you gotta stop. So the king of Babylon is inserting himself into the place of Messiah. He's inserting himself as the King of Kings by taking on that identity as the son of the dawn, the son of Shachor, the first light. So let's look at the verb form. We know that it means black or blackish, depending on how it's used. The verb form shachar means to seek after diligently, particularly early in the morning or the dawn. And so this is where you're going to get your adjectives, shachor, shachora. So one who is swarthy, if we apply this essential meaning of the sheresh, of the root, we see that one who is swarthy, or one who is black, is one who rises early to seek righteousness. And so this corresponds to the son of the dawn, the morning star. This is language of Messiah. And it's the language that the king of Babylon, the anti-Messiah, wanted applied to himself. He's the one who wanted to be sought. He wanted to be the deity. And so I wanted to give you a context, Isaiah 26:9, where you can get the idea of shachar being used as a verb to demonstrate how you seek righteousness, not just diligently, but the idea that goes with it is early in the morning, at first light, you are seeking his face. And so in Isaiah 26:9, it says, at night, my soul longs for you. Indeed, my spirit, and there's an equivalent expression here where it says, my soul longs, it's nafshi, literally my nefesh. And it says, indeed, my spirit within me seeks. And that's ruchi. So it's showing that the spirit and the soul are longing and seeking after the same thing, which is what they were created to do. The soul was created to seek what the spirit seeks. And so it says, indeed, my spirit within me seeks you diligently. And so that verb there, to seek diligently, is Strong's 7836. You know, we just looked at 7837. 7836, you can see it used in the verb form to seek diligently. And it gives us a context. It says, for when the earth experiences your judgments, the inhabitants of the world learn righteousness. That's pretty significant, because if we're going to connect this black horse in Revelation to what it means to be black but lovely, to seeking after Adonai properly, not seeking after the king of Babylon, not seeking after golden self-images, not following the designs of one's own heart, instead allowing his word written on your heart to be your guide and what you seek after. This is important because the longing of the soul and the spirit to seek him early in the morning at the dawn. So at night, the soul longs, and the spirit seeks. If we read into the verb shachar, the spirit seeks early in the morning. And so he's always being sought, whether at night or early in the morning. But the what do we call it? The long night of the soul. All night the soul longs. And then in the morning, at the first light of dawn, it says, my spirit within me seeks you diligently. So that suggests there that long night of the soul is not a pleasant time. It says, for when the earth experiences your judgments. The idea here is, at this time that my soul and spirit are seeking and longing for you, it's because the earth has experienced your judgments. It says, however, at the very same time the earth is experiencing judgments, the inhabitants of the world learn righteousness. So let's think about that black horse. He's going out, the horse with the black hair. Remember, black hair is a sign of life. It's a sign of healing, that the problem here is possibly only skin deep. It's not a spiritual sickness. And in Isaiah 26:9, we're getting that idea, because the soul and the spirit are seeking diligently through the night up until the first light of dawn. Even though the earth is experiencing judgment, at the very same time, the world is learning righteousness. And so I just copied and pasted in here the definition of shachar. It's verb form, so you could see it. It's to dawn, to be up early at any task. And it says with the implication of earnestness. And I think this is where you're getting the translation, seek diligently. It says by extension, to search for with painstaking care, to inquire early, to rise early and seek diligently early in the morning. So if we take what we know here, we can see why maybe the Vav being used, I am black but comely, can also be translated, I am black and comely, with the Vav. And we're going to look at different explanations of why that multi-purpose conjunction might have been used. Because one who is black but comely is describing for us someone who seeks righteousness early. They long for it through the night, and in the dawn, they seek it diligently. Just kind of put yourself back in the sandals of the Israelites at the Passover. How through the night, they would have been hearing the cries of the Egyptians. They would have been listening to the judgments on the earth. But at the very same time that you're hearing the judgments and the cries and the wails of the Egyptians around you, nevertheless, the inhabitants are learning righteousness. And they're either learning righteousness for their good, like the Israelites, learning how to come out of the realm of death, or they're learning righteousness in spite of the fact that they despise righteousness. They're still going to learn it. Either way, they're learning the power of righteousness through the judgments. So the one who seeks Adonai early in the morning, this is the one who is black and lovely. This is the one who is black but lovely. I think the answer here is yes. And so you can see now why the king of Babylon wanted to be identified as the son of the dawn. He wanted to put himself in the place of God so that others would come to him, so that his kingdom would be everlasting. But there's something that King Nebuchadnezzar could never do that the Messiah can do. In fact, if you'll go back to Isaiah chapter 14 and read the entire passage, it takes great pains to describe the king of Babylon post-mortem. The worms in him and all this stuff. You're like, ew, gross. But the writer, the prophet Isaiah, wants us to experience that the king of Babylon is really, really, really dead. And he really, 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 really can't help himself. Because it talks about, how the kings who have already died will see him coming and they're going to be like, oh, you thought you were something. You thought you could outwit God. You thought you could be king of kings. You thought your kingdom would last forever. You thought you would extend your kingdom up into the heavens. And look, you're just like us. The worms crawl in, the worms crawl out. You really are the son of the dawn now, aren't you? You can hear that tone all through that chapter of Isaiah 14. So there's the fake morning star, the king of Babylon, who we know will be completely and fully exposed in the book of Revelation, just as the prophets say. People are going to walk by, they're going to see his grave, see that he cannot resurrect himself, and say, is this the man that terrified the world? Is this what it was? Is that all it was? Because he's going to die like everyone else. He can't save himself. He can't resurrect himself. Why were we so terrified of the king of Babylon? Well, the king of Babylon represents what terrifies us about ourselves, and that's the strength of the soul when it desires to be worshipped, when it desires to act upon its own lusts, when it refuses the boundaries of the spirit that is based on it is written, not I feel, I want, I think. And so in that sense, there will come a day when we will all look at that aspect of ourselves that in times past had so much power over us. Whether we were addicted to our own will, whether we were addicted to an emotion, whether we were addicted to a substance, whatever that stronghold was in our lives, which is simply a stronghold of the soul, in hindsight, we're going to look back on it and say, why were you so strong? Why was I in such captivity to that emotion? Why was I in such captivity to that addiction? You will see the substance for what it is. You will see the emotion for the damage that it's done. You will see the stubbornness of will for the damage it's done, not just to you, but to people you love. And you'll look back in hindsight, and that happens when we get older. We look back at the things we did when we were younger, and we're like, why did I ever think that was a good idea? Well, once the kingdom comes, we will look back at that powerful strength of soul and say, how was it ever that strong? But remember, the adversary, which is thought to be the evil inclination, in Judaism at least, and John seems to echo that, is going to be bound for 1,000 years. And in that case, that particular power of the soul, it's not going to be that strong. It's not going to be given free rein. And so for 1,000 years, we will be able to look back at the strength of our soul that we had to fight so hard. That's why we say there is a reward for sustaining that battle and making sure that your soul does stay in subjection to your spirit. Because when you look back, you're going to say, you know what? I didn't wait till the kingdom came to start taming my soul. I didn't wait until the kingdom came to start fasting on Yom Kippur. I waged the battle. And when you look back, you're going to say, wow, at the time, it just didn't seem like I could overcome it. But in hindsight, I'm wondering why it was so strong. And this is the message that we see in Revelation as the king of Babylon is addressed. The king of Babylon, Babylon the Great is fallen. And people are mourning. The merchants of the earth are mourning. But I think part of that is like, why did he have so much power over us? Why did this commercial system, why did this economic system, why did this religious system, why did this governmental system, whatever we put our trust in, why did it have so much power over us? And it's because it knew what our soul bait was. And it worked on that soul bait. So we want to look at a different dawn, not the son of the dawn that the king of Babylon thought himself to be, but the true Messiah, the true morning star, the true son of the dawn. It says in Luke 24:1, it says, but on the first day of the week at early dawn, that is Shachor, they came to the tomb bringing the spices which they had prepared. And they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. And that's it in a nutshell, guys. This is what the king of Babylon can never do. This is what our souls can never do for themselves. UPS. Shine. Relax. So the king of Babylon, it says the nations of the world, the other kings and rulers of the world, they're going to look at the king of Babylon and say, was this all it was? Why did we ever fear somebody who couldn't even resurrect from the dead? We look at King Yeshua and we eventually acknowledge, eventually every knee is going to bow and every tongue is going to confess that, yes, he is the Lord over the earth. And so those who sought him early in the morning, we know that their souls did go through tribulation that night. In fact, they had gone through tribulation here on consecutive nights. But once the Shabbat is over and they've gathered their spices to prepare the body, they do, and because of the power of their spirit that knows the truth, even though their soul's not convinced yet, the soul's just saying, okay, I'll go with the spirit on this one, but I don't believe he's alive. And so they get to the tomb, and lo and behold, the stone is rolled away, and they didn't find the body of Yeshua. And so what is happening for those 3 days, judgment entered the world. There were earthquakes, there was darkness, there was all sorts of things going on for that 3 days, above and below. And so on the third day, which represents resurrection, and by the way, the black horse is the third horse. He is the horse of resurrection in terms of what it represents. When they look in the tomb, this is what they realize. They have put their faith in the true Son of the Dawn. They have put their faith in a king who can give them eternal life. They have put their faith in a king who will have an eternal kingdom. They have put their faith in a king who will rule over the Garden of Eden, where it is said there was good gold. And remember, when we did the study, we said good gold is not the quality of a mineral. It's a name of somebody. It's a proper name. It's a proper noun. So there was good gold in the garden. It was a prophecy of a people known as good gold. And so these are people who were seeking after the Son of the Dawn, the one who can resurrect us from the dead. They have not bowed to golden images. So it's taking us back to the beginning, back to the garden where the serpent just destroyed everything. So in Luke 24:4, the story continues. While they were perplexed about this, like where did his body go? Behold, 2 men suddenly stood near them in dazzling clothing. And as the women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground, the men said to them, why do you seek the living one among the dead? This is what they're pointing out. This is what the Son of the Dawn can do. He can resurrect from the dead. He's not here, but he has risen. Remember how he spoke to you while he was still in Galilee, saying that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men. There's that tribulation of the soul, the dark night of the soul. Be crucified, and the third day rise again. And they remembered his words and returned from the tomb and reported all these things to the 11 and to all the rest. And so the 2 men, if they're angels, they remind them, okay, this is the third day. You know that's a day of resurrection. He's not here, he arose. And he told you that. He told you on the third day he would rise again. He told you that he would be the Son of the Dawn. And so when they came to seek him early, they were fulfilling prophecy. And so if we go to Revelation 6:5, it says, when he broke the third seal, talking about the third day, resurrection, now let's look at the third seal. I heard the third living creature saying, come, Bo. I looked, and behold, a black horse. And he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. Remember the judgments? Let's go back here so you can reference that again. Isaiah 26:9. For when the earth experiences your judgments, the inhabitants of the world learn righteousness. Okay, let's go back to our black horse. He who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard something like a voice in the center of the 4 living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not damage the oil and the wine. So you can see the 3s all through this passage associated with the black horse. The black horse, remember, he has black hair, which is a sign of life. It's a sign of resurrection from the dead. It's a sign of healing. And he is writing out, where he was writing out, it would correspond to the first fruits of the barley, because that's the third feast, it's the third moed. And he even mentions the price of the courts, the 3 courts of barley. So it's like we're getting resurrection, 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 resurrection. And that's what the angels are telling the women who rise and seek him early. There's a resurrection, there's life from the dead. His resurrection corresponds to the first fruits of the barley. And so looking for that black hair is looking for the lovely. It's looking for the shachara. So yeah, she is black, but lovely. There has been resurrection. She has sought after the one who can resurrect her from the dead, not simply incorporate her into his earthly kingdom and his earthly plans that do have a shelf life. And that king cannot resurrect them from the dead. So they have sought the one who can resurrect and therefore can resurrect them from the dead. They have sought him early. So what's going on here? We have in Hosea 5:15 a little clue. And again, it's using the verb form of shachar. I will go and return to my place. This is the Holy One speaking because he's offended with their sin, with their lack of shame for their sin. He says, I will go and return to my place till they, and this is thought to be the withdrawing of the presence, you might say the Shekhinah, if you're familiar with that word, but the withdrawal of his presence from the temple. He says, till they acknowledge their offense and seek my face. In their affliction, that word there is b'tsar. Tsar is affliction. They will seek me early. And then you can see the verb form of shachar. Yeshacharunen. So they will seek me early when they're ready to repent, when they're ready to acknowledge their offense, when they are ready to seek my face. And so we can transfer this same pattern over to the search for the black hair and the leper or the metzorah. And so I listed the different words that have this root of tsar so that you can see they're going to seek my face in their affliction. And this is, it's crazy here today. So they can see that the process of these 4 horses riding out is a process of examination for leprosy. That's why we needed the instructions of leprosy. If we have the instructions to try to find leprosy, then we will know how to acknowledge our offenses and properly seek his face. And so we can see in the priest search for the black hair. What is the priest looking for? He wants to know if this individual has acknowledged his or her offense, if this individual has sought the face of Adonai, even in their affliction. And remember, affliction is tsar. If they have sought his face early in the morning, if they're looking for a resurrection of the soul from the only one who can resurrect their soul, have they ceased to seek life in dead things? Things that will not go into the kingdom, things that will only endure for the kingdoms of the earth and the kingdoms of men, but not for the world to come, not for the kingdom of the Messiah. They'll seek me in their affliction, b'tsar. Okay, so a leper in English and Hebrew is a metzorah. Okay, it's one who is in affliction. The leper's affliction is called tzarat. Tzarat. So a metzorah is in an affliction of tzarat. The Hebrew word for tribulation, and this is what they said, in tribulation, they're going to seek me. The word for tribulation is tzarar. The hell bug that we've been studying in the book of Revelation, the supernatural bug that starts attacking as these seals are opened, That bug is called the Tzilah. Egypt was Mitzrayim. And so we can see that Yeshua dying and being resurrected during Passover, why the setting for it is Egypt, Mitzrayim. When they came out at the Passover, the pattern was set. And so as the women are seeking early the face of Yeshua, then, at one point, I don't remember which gospel it was, where it talks about how they saw the napkin folded that had gone over his face. And to me, that's a suggestion that this was prophecy fulfilled. They were literally seeking his face, and then they noticed the napkin or the piece of cloth that would have gone over his face. It tells you they were specifically seeking him. At any rate, the prophetic implications of the black horse going out, being third in number, I think as he goes out with these scales, as he goes out at a time of tribulation, as he is going out to judge the lepers, the Metzorah, in a time of tribulation, Tzorar, he is judging, like a priest, the wounds of Tzarat, looking at our afflictions and saying, is this affliction only skin deep? Or is it supernatural? Has this been supernaturally imposed for rebellion? And am I able, according to the instructions, to pronounce this person healed, ready to come out of Egypt, ready to come out of Mitzrayim and the tribulations? Or do I need to send them back for another quarantine? Which, again, that is really relevant to us right now. We understand quarantine and how we might be undergoing an examination and have been given time to examine ourselves according to these questions of the Torah. So that might be a good place to stop since our time's up. And that takes us into the daughters of Jerusalem and who they are. Long story short, a daughter is a town that is dependent upon another. And so we can go through those in next week's lesson. But this, I think, gives us a pretty good handle on what it means to be Black and at the very same time to be lovely, because the Blackness suggests that these are people who are seeking early the face of Adonai. They are seeking after righteousness early. They're not waiting for the horse to ride out to them with scales of justice, that they're examining themselves. And they are not confused as to who the King of Kings is. They are not confused as to who resurrected from the dead, nor are they confused as to who can resurrect them from the dead. And we live in a confused world. This is why the testimony of Joseph is still important. We need to still be testifying to the resurrection of Yeshua from the dead. And that there is a kingdom. And that kingdom is going to be run with perfect judgment. And there will be consequences for the things that we do on this earth that would constitute worshiping the king of Babylon. Even believers can worship the king of Babylon, because that's what the king of Babylon wanted the three Hebrews to do. People who knew the truth, were educated in the truth, walked in the truth, prayed in the truth, ate in the truth. Nevertheless, he tried to entice them to bow down to his image. And so that's why more and more, as the days grow short, we need to be really firm, not just learning about Torah, but committing to it in an evil day. Because, like I said last night, it's not going to be by accident that people get the mark of the beast, it's going to be a willful rebellion against the word that you know. For people like us. For the rest of the world, I don't know. Yes, they could accidentally do it because they're already in confusion. But for people like us who know the word, we are just like the 3 Hebrews. If after all we know, we still bow to that idol, then whoa, 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 whoa. And whoa.